You've probably heard the stat. 70% of lottery winners end up broke within a few years. It gets repeated in nearly every video on this topic, usually right before a montage of yachts and regret. It's not true. The organisation it's credited to, a financial education body that supposedly researched this, came out in 2018 and said plainly that it's not our number. We never produced that study. It came from one offhand comment at a conference in 2001, got repeated by a journalist, and then just never stopped being repeated. Nobody checked it. It sounded right, so it stuck. Here's what's actually true, and it's honestly more interesting than the myth. Roughly a third of lottery winners face serious financial distress or bankruptcy. Still high, still worth understanding, not the cartoonish number everyone quotes. And the real, documented cases tell you something the myth never could. Exactly what goes wrong, and why it has almost nothing to do with intelligence. Let's look at two real UK cases. Details change to protect the people involved. This isn't about them specifically, it's about the pattern. Not to laugh at anyone, to actually understand the mechanism. In the early 2000s, a teenager working an ordinary manual job won almost £10 million on the national lottery. 19 years old. No warning, no preparation. Just an ordinary day, and then, suddenly, more money than most people see across an entire working life. Within a few years, the headlines had turned him into a tabloid cautionary tale. A large house bought outright. A significant chunk of the winnings put into a single risky investment. A costly divorce settlement. Legal trouble along the way. By roughly 8 years after the win, he'd been declared bankrupt. He's spoken about that period since then in interviews with a kind of blunt honesty that's actually more useful than the tabloid version. He's described his mindset at the time in almost exactly those terms, that his focus had narrowed down to short-term pleasure, full stop, with no bigger picture attached to any of it. Here's the thing worth sitting with. He wasn't unintelligent. He wasn't uniquely reckless compared to any other 19-year-old handed a windfall with zero preparation. He was a teenager who'd never had to make a financial decision bigger than a phone contract, suddenly holding a number that most financial advisors spend entire careers helping people manage responsibly. Nobody sat him down beforehand. Nobody handed him a framework. The money had just arrived, and he was expected to know already what to do with it. This one matters because it breaks the assumption that this only happens to people who blow it on parties. In the mid-2000s, a couple won just under £2 million, and by their own account, they didn't go wild. One of them has spoken publicly, years later, with real candour, saying that property and business investments seemed like the sensible move. The kind of thing that sounds, on paper, like exactly what you're supposed to do with a windfall. Then the 2008 financial crash happened. It hit the property and business investments hard, at the worst possible moment, and the money that had seemed solidly invested turned out to be far more exposed than either of them had understood. The marriage, well over a decade, didn't survive the strain either. Within a few years, one of them had almost nothing left, and the other was relying on family support to get by. This is the case that should actually worry you more than the first one, if you're being honest, because this wasn't recklessness. This was two people trying to be responsible, making decisions that sounded prudent, without the specific expertise needed to actually evaluate whether property and business was diversified, well-timed, or appropriately risk-managed for their specific situation. Sounding sensible and being sensible aren't the same thing, and nobody was checking which one they'd actually done. Two very different stories. A reckless teenager and a cautious couple. Both ended up in serious financial trouble. That's the pattern worth understanding, because it's not really about lottery tickets at all. First, there's no time to build the habits that normally protect people. Most financial discipline is built slowly. You learn to budget because you have to. You learn what a bad investment feels like because you've made a few small ones. You build instincts over years of ordinary financial decisions. A windfall skips all of that. You go from managing a normal salary to managing a life-changing sum overnight, with none of the intermediate experience that would normally tell you when something's wrong. Second, everyone around you changes at the same moment you do. Family, friends, distant acquaintances, people who haven't spoken to you in years. The social pressure that arrives alongside sudden wealth is its own genuine problem. And it's very hard to say no to people you love when you're holding more money than you know what to do with. Third, and this is the one that explains the second case specifically, there's no natural mechanism that tells you when you're out of your depth. If you'd made those same property and business decisions with money you'd earned slowly over 20 years, you'd likely have picked up warning signs along the way, or built a network of people who'd flag the risk. A windfall drops you straight into decisions at a scale you've never operated at, with no accumulated instinct to catch the mistake before it's made. None of this is about intelligence. Both cases involved people who, by every account, were perfectly capable in the rest of their lives. The mechanism that breaks isn't judgment in general. It's the complete absence of a system for this specific, unfamiliar situation. Here's the actual point of this video, and it's not really about lottery odds. The same mechanism applies to any sudden windfall. An inheritance, a redundancy payout, a house sale that nets more than expected, a big bonus, anything where money arrives faster than your habits can handle. The research on financial windfalls generally, not just lottery wins, shows the same pattern. People who receive a large lump sum tend to spend far more of it far faster than they intend to, regardless of how the money arrived. So if you're ever on the receiving end of a genuine windfall, and plenty of ordinary people will be at some point through an inheritance or a payout, if not a lottery ticket, the lesson from both of these cases is the same, and it's simpler than you'd think. Don't make any big decision in the first few months. Not because the decisions are automatically wrong, but because you don't yet have the system to tell a good one from a bad one. Get advice from someone with no financial stake in your answer, not a friend with an opportunity, not a relative with a business idea, an actual regulated advisor whose only job is protecting your interests. And build the boring structure first. What's this for? What time frame? What's the actual risk you're taking before a single pound moves anywhere? I want to be careful here because these are real people, even with the details changed, and some windfall stories end somewhere much darker than bankruptcy, genuine family breakdown, addiction, and in the worst documented cases, tragedy that goes far beyond money. That's not what either of the two cases in this video became, and I'm not going to present it that way for effect. But it's worth knowing that the stakes here are genuinely human, not just financial, which is exactly why Here's How Not to Blow Your Lottery Win content that treats this as entertainment misses the point entirely. Neither of the people in this video was foolish. They were ordinary people, handed something extraordinary with no instructions and no time to prepare. That's the actual story. Not, look how badly they messed up. Look how predictable this is once you understand what's actually happening. The problem was never that they won too much. It's that nobody hands you a system when the money arrives. You're just expected to know already, and almost nobody does, because almost nobody's ever had to. The winners who kept their money weren't smarter than the ones who didn't. They were the ones who slowed down, got proper advice, and built a system before they spent a single pound of it. That's true whether the windfall is £10 million or 10,000. The size changes. The mechanism doesn't. So here's what I'd like to know in the comments. If a genuine windfall landed in your account tomorrow, inheritance, redundancy, whatever, what's the first thing you'd actually do? Not the fantasy version, the real first move. I'm curious how many people have actually thought this through versus how many haven't. If this helped, hit like and subscribe if you're not already. Proper Pence puts out UK-focused personal finance videos every week, all with real UK numbers. See you in the next one.